My name is Dan Hill. I'm Cayuga. I'm Heron Clan. My story about the flutes starts with 1981. I was teaching in San Diego at Viejas Reservation, and I went to a educational conference in Los Angeles. A man named Woodrow Haney was in a movie that was playing in one of the presentations. He played the flute, and I liked the sound of the flute. It really attracted me to the birds and the animals. So I tried to get a flute from him. Well, actually, he showed up at a powwow the next day in Orange County powwow, and he had flutes on the table, and I tried to trade him, and he couldn't do it. He didn't have no room to go home. I offered him a mountain lion skin, and he had no place to put it on the plane, so he couldn't take the trade. So that summer in '81, I came back here to New York. I traveled and I hit all the powwows and art shows and all the places I could sell my arts and crafts, because I decided to make things that people didn't want to take time to make or didn't have time to make. So I did a lot of beadwork, a lot of necklaces, a lot of medallions and hair ties. And I set up in Oklahoma City at Champion of Champions powwow. And 20 minutes after I set up, he sat up next to me. He put his table with his flutes there. And so I did make a trade with him at that time. And since then, my whole process of what I do has changed. The flutes have changed all the things that I thought I was going to do in my traveling around and going to powwows. The sound of the flute is, for me, it's outside, being a child, being playing in the streams and the creeks and watching the tadpoles. And so I started messing around and learning how to play the flutes. And by the time I got back to New York, everybody was wanting that flute that I had traded for, and I wouldn't do it because I really enjoyed the sound and making the sound and making it work. So since then, I start making small ones like this and like this out of wood. I start learning by making them. I start learning how to play by making them. So since '81, I've made probably over 400 or 500 flutes. I lost track at 178, and that was in '89. So I don't know how long I've been making them. I mean, I don't know how many I've made, but as I've traveled around the country, I've learned different tribal scales. This is a Seneca Flute from the Rochester Museum, but it's from Tonawanda. It's 1860s. And the sound of it is lower and so the sound of the flutes and where they come from, the nations that they come from. I've traveled to the museums all over the place, and I always wanted to make things with my arts and crafts stuff as old as I could, either pre-contact or right at contact with the colonials. So the flutes that I found, I've saved about 30. I've sought the sound of them because of the animals they call. So for me, it really tells us that we have a lot of communication with the animals and with the natural world. So as I've traveled, I've always heard about Panazazi flutes. Panazazi's coming from the time of the Pueblo people and the ones in the deserted ruins in New Mexico and Utah, and the flute has a different mechanics. These are channeled air. The air goes in and goes up and gets channeled across a cutting edge that makes the sound. These are hollow all the way through. So this is like a pop bottle making the same sound. So by making the flutes, I've been learning that there's different sounds for the wood itself, the mechanics of making the flute, the diameter of the hole inside, the length, the type of wood, whether it's apple. This is apple, but it has a small diameter. So the wood and all those things make a difference in the sound. This is one I'm working on now. It's another apple branch. This came from an apple tree that was in front of my house that somebody ran over. So I took the branches and made them into flutes. This one I'm still working on. So I make them out of redwood. This is aromatic cedar. I've done redwood. I've done all kinds of. I have an elk antler flute that I've made that is about that long, and it has a real high pitch like the apple. But this is a western red cedar, and it's there's a story that goes with this that keeps getting longer. I put a skunk on here. Well, this has got a wolf on it, but I have this one with the skunk. The skunk story starts in Mashpee, powwow, and my friend showed me this picture of a man playing a flute, and in the corner of the picture was a family of skunks coming towards him, and everybody, all the animals and birds are listening to him and stuff, and he's playing the flute to court this woman that's over by the cooking pot, and there's two older women there with her, and she's ignoring him. She's continuing to cook, but everybody else is listening to him play the flute. And so I made a joke that all he could attract were skunks. So in 1990 I made this flute and this flute, and the sound of this flute has a water in the bottom, a warble. Sometimes you have to adjust it to get it right. But the sound inspires me to create more flutes and to create stories and songs that I talk about when I do performances. As my grandmother said, we have to speak up for the natural world. The four-leggeds, the two-leggeds, the birds, the animals, the ones that don't have a voice that we're not listening to. We have to speak up for them and not let those things die, because then we're alone and we're not going to have anything that's good for us. So that's what my grandmother told me. And I don't know whether she meant the artwork, the cultural, physical material, or the way of thinking. So I try to do both.